Okay, we are on Chav Ches Amid Aleph. We're 2 or 3 lines into the page. Just to finish up the sugya, the Gemara had said in a brisa yesterday, V'shebefnim v'shebe mitzayra, regarding sprinkling inside the azara and the oil of the mitzayra. So they would take the oil and they would sprinkle it towards the heichal. So the brisa had said, Shaloi lishman psulis. If it's done Shaloi lishman, it's a problem. But Shaloi mechavana is ksheris. But if it's not directly to the heichal, let's say you go to the right, well, that's fine. That we had yesterday. Comes the Gemara Vatanya, but the Brisa says, Bein Shaloi Lishman, Bein Shaloi Mechavanis Ksheris. But the other Brisa says that if you sprinkle the oil Shaloi Lishman, it's fine. So the question, which one is it? If is it Shaloi Lishman, is that a problem or not? Now, the truth is, the classic karbanos that are Shaloi Lishman being a problem is Chatas and Pesach. This oil of a Mitzayra, I don't really see what the problem would be. So the Gemara says, Omer Rav Yosef, Loi Kasha. Ha Rav Eliezer, Ha Rabbanan. So, what is Rav Eliezer Rabbanan? So if you remember, Rav Eliezer's shita is that there's an additional carbon that's Shaloi Lishman a problem, that's an Asham. So the Gemara speaks it out. Rav Eliezer, the Makish Ashal Mechatas. Rav Eliezer is Makish Asham Techatas. That the same way a Chatas Shaloi Lishman is a problem. So to an Asham Shaloi Lishman is a problem. So Makish Nami Lug La Asham. He also compares the Lug of the Mitzayra to an Asham as well. The pasuk says, "V'lokach keves echad osham l'tnufa v'loig shemen." Because the mitzayra has to bring an osham and the lug, and it's in the same pasuk. So Rav Eliezer, it steps. So chatas hekish chatas to osham, hekish osham to lug of the mitzayra. So the same way chatas is a problem, osham's a problem, oil's a problem. Shaloi lishman. The Rabbanan, loy makshi, the Rabbanan hold the only karbanos that are a problem are Chatas and Pesach, and not an Asham, and not the lug of the Mitzayra as well. Okay, makes sense. Here's the issue though. The issue is we have a rule with karbanos, Davar Alam Mehekesh Ein Choyz Ma Mehekesh, which means you can't have A to B with a Hekesh and then B to C with a Hekesh. We don't do that. So Rav Eliezer is basically doing this now. You go Chatas to Asham, Shaloi Lishman is a problem through a Hekesh. Asham through Mitzayra, Shaloi Lishman is a Hekesh. We don't do that. So says the Gemara, Rav Eliezer, V'chidavar Allah Mehekesh, Choyzim Ma Mehekesh. The Gemara answer is much more simple, and that is, it's a little misleading. You have two brises. One brisa says that if you do Shaloi Lishman, it's kosher. One brisa says Shaloi Lishman is puzzle. So you know the answer is, it's incredibly simple. It's just not, the Lashon is not Meduik. What's the classic rule outside of a chatas? An oila shaloi lishman. So what's the rule? It's kosher, v'shaloi olu l'baylim l'shem chayva, which means it's kosher, but you're not getting the atonement you were looking for. That's what these brises mean. One says kosher because it's kosher. One says puzzle, not puzzle. It just means you don't get the tikkun you were looking for. It's not the greatest lashon. Okay. It says the Gemara, Lamarava ha'ava ha'rabanan, kan lahachshir, kan lahartzais. Okay. Very good. So this next sugya is continuing in things that are ma'akiv each other, and we're dealing with the menorah. Now, the menorah, I think the Artzka has a picture. It's very helpful. Chumash also has pictures. It's basically just obviously there's a famous, Rambam about being diagonal as opposed to, curved. Ayin Yoel Gold video from Tisha B'Av. But B'kitzer, the main thing to remember is that the menorah had different components. It had the stem, obviously, and the hands that come off it. It had the cups on top. Then it had the bowls on top. It had 3 decorative cups that were a little bit more like squarish. It had these bowls that were also decorative, and it had these flowers. And if you look in the picture, you can count them. The Gemara's going to count. It's like 21 cups and 11 flowers, 11 balls and 9 flowers. I think that's the breakup. Okay. So the Mishnah says like this: Shiva kane menorah, the 7 branches of menorah makvin says it's makiv, meaning if you're missing a branch, no good, not yoitza. Shiva neriseh makvin says the 7 lamps on top. So it's not just 7 branches; you have to have the 7 bowls on top to hold the oil. Shtei parshi sheb mezuzah makvin says the mezuzah has the first 2 parshas of Shema. If you're missing one parsha, it's ma'akiv each other. Afilu ksav echad ma'akiv. The truth is, even one letter being improperly written is ma'akiv. Arba parsha shebe tefillin ma'akiv says that the 4 parshas of tefillin are ma'akiv, meaning we don't say, well, 3 out of 4 is enough. Nope. Afilu ksav echad ma'akiv, and even one letter being written improperly apostles the entire tefillin. Arba tzitzias ma'akiv says that the 4 tzitzias strings not just the 4 strings, the 4 corners. Meaning, if you have a beggar that has 3 corners of tzitzis and 1 corner you're missing, or it's puzzle, you don't say, well, you got 3 out of 4. Nope, the whole yaitza. It's puzzle tzitzis. She'arbatan mitzvah achas, because the 4 corners constitute 1 mitzvah. Rabbi Shmuel disagrees. He says, no, arbatan arba mitzvahs. It's actually 4 mitzvahs. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, conceptually, if you were to have 3 out of 4, you'd mekayim 3 mitzvahs. At least mekayim 3 mitzvahs. So, yeah, you could be kosher even if 1 corner is puzzle, because each one is a separate mitzvah. Each is a separate mitzvah. Okay, the Gemara will talk about the shittas later on. What we're going to talk about is the menorah. But one thing is important to make a hakdama, because if you don't make this hakdama, it's a little bit confusing. The hakdama is like this: the menorah could be made of different materials. Obviously, it was made of gold, like ideally, but conceptually, the menorah could be made of different materials. It could be made of iron or brass or silver. But here's the story, though. There are major differences between if it's made of gold or not made of gold. And the difference is as follows. If it's made of gold, it has to be hammered out of 1 piece of gold. If you're making it, I mean, you can't just take scraps of gold and melt it together. It has to be 1 piece hammered out. Miksha achas. If you're not using gold, let's say you're using copper, it could be made of scraps. Another halacha. If you're making it out of gold, then you have to have all those decorative cups and the flowers and all those things. If you're not making it of gold, you don't need that. You just need 7 hands. That's it. Third halacha, if you're making it out of gold, it has to be a kikar, the weight of a kikar of gold. If you're making it out of anything else, the weight doesn't matter. Those are the 3 halachas that are unique to gold as opposed to non-gold. Okay. So says the Gemara, my time, what's the reason the 7 branches are makiv each other? Because havia ksibahu. It says havia, a lashon of havia, that the tia, which is again, anytime that it says that way, it's makiv. Tan Rabbanan, menorah ha'isabah. The menorah could be produced min ha'eshes. It could be made of a block of any raw material. Min hazav. It can be made of gold. Meaning gold or other materials are an option. But also min agrutais. If it's made of scraps of gold, puzzle. Again, if it's gold, it has to be miksha achas, 1 large sheet of gold. Mishar minim etachais. But if you use scraps out of other materials, ksheira. So if the menorah is being made out of iron, it could be made of scraps of iron. So the Gemara wants to know basically why. So what's going to end up happening is, by gold it's makiv, by non-gold it's not makiv. And the question is obviously going to be, well, the pasuk says that it's essential. The Gemara says, yeah, but it's not really that essential. But I thought it is, by gold. And the Gemara is going to have to get to the drushes of how we got to this conclusion. So the Gemara says, Ma'ishna min agrutais psula. Why is it that if you made scraps of gold, so you scrapped pieces of gold together, it's a problem? Dichsiv miksha. Miksha of havia. It says the lashon of havia regarding miksha. Miksha means a block, and it says havia, it's ma'akiv. Okay, totally fair. But shar minim metachas nami, but by other materials as well, it also says matachas nami. Then it also says zahav v'havia. Meaning, if you're telling me everything about the menorah is ma'akiv, because it says a havia, so that's why it has to be miksha achas, but it also says zav. So that should exclude all other materials. So says the Gemara, Amar kra te'aseh, l'rabba shar mitachas. Te'aseh means it should be made anyway. That includes other materials. So although it says gold, te'aseh is inclusive. So says the Gemara, ve'ema l'rabba's grutais. If te'aseh is inclusive, te'aseh is inclusive, why are you including other materials? Why not include scraps of gold? Right? You have a choice. You got to include one. You can include other materials, or you can include gold scraps. So you're including other materials and not gold scraps. Why not? So it says the Gemara, well, it says miksha, which means one solid item. Havia. Well, the Gemara counters tiasanami amikshaksiv. Then say the same thing. Then meaning that inclusive pasuk. You're right. There are pasuk miksha and havia. It implies that it can't be that, but tiasa is inclusive. So the Gemara says miksha la'akiv. It says miksha twice. So that's why I know it has to be a solid block of gold that can't be made of scraps. So it says the Gemara, Zav nami ma'akiv. But then it says Zav twice too. Meaning, that's the point. It says the same Lashonis multiple times by both. So why is it that I'm more makel to include other materials but not scraps of gold? So the Gemara says, Hi mai. Iyamre b'shloime min agrutais psula, mishar min metachas kshera, hainu zav v'zav, miksha l'drasha. Eliyamre min agrutais kshera, mishar min metachas psula, zav miksha mai darshaveh. The Gemara is basically going to answer like this. You have a choice. You could include gold scraps and exclude other materials, or you could include other materials and exclude gold scraps. If you go with that approach, to include other materials and exclude gold scraps, which is how we paskin, then all the extra words of zav, and miksha, we could darshan. As we're going to continue in a moment, we're going to make drushes. It works. If you don't go with this approach, and you say, no, you don't. It doesn't have to be miksha. Solid gold is not essential. You can include other scraps, but zav is ma'akiv. Then the drushes don't work. As we're going to see right now, we're going to have there's multiple words zav. It says multiple. I think zav 5 times. It says miksha 4 times. We're going to darshan each one, but it only works if you go with this approach. If you start going the other approach, you'll have extra words. It won't work. Correct. That's the only way to do scraps is to solder it together. It still won't work. So says the Gemara, my darsha, what was this drasha that you said only works if you follow this approach and this conclusion? The Tanya, kikar zahav tahar yeyaseh oisa es kol hakelim ha'ela. You should make a kikar of pure gold and make the menorah out of it. But says the Gemara, all the halachas I told you before. Ba zahav, if it's made of gold, ba kikar, it has to be a kikar. Einay ba zahav, einay ba kikar. If it's not gold, it doesn't have to be a kikar. So that's, by the way, all of this, so that's the first halacha that I told you, that gold. If it's made of gold, it has to be a kikar. If it's not made of gold, it doesn't have to be a kikar. Another halacha. Giviyeha, kaftereha, befracheha. The goblets, the knobs, the flowers, all those decorative stuff. Ba'azav, ba'giviyeha, kafterim, bracheha. Eina ba'azav, eina ba'giviyim, kafterim, brachim. You only need these decorative things if it's made of gold, if not, not. And the last halacha, so by the way, so the point is like this. You had a choice before. You could include other materials and exclude scraps of gold, or the opposite. Other materials are no good. The problem is if you say other materials are no good, these drushes don't work. What's the whole point of this drusha? If it's made of gold, it has to be a kikar. If it's made of gold, it has to have decorative things. If it's not made of gold, then you don't need a kikar. You don't need. That's assuming non-gold is an option. If you go with the approach that non-gold's out, these drushes are now extra. They don't work. So we've built this pyramid on this notion that other materials are an option, and therefore we're just going to stick that way. So it says the Gemara, "Ve'imanami ba'azav ba'kanim, eina ba'azav, eina ba'kanim." So the Gemara does akasha. If you're telling me that basically there's like 2 different types of menorahs, there's a gold menorah that has all its details, a kikar, it's got the decorative goblets and all that stuff, and then there's the non-gold menorah, let's say the tin menorah, the metal menorah, that just doesn't need any of this stuff. So how do you even know that you need hands? How do you know branches? I'm not really sure. Well, the Gemara's response is Hahu Pamuti Mikri. That's called a candlestick. I don't really know. I'm not sure what it meaning. Maybe you don't even need 7. Meaning maybe once you're already like slashing the weight, slashing the decorative things, maybe you don't even need seven sticks. Maybe just 1 candlestick is yaitza. The answer is that's not called a menorah. A menorah by definition has multiple hands, as opposed to a candlestick, which is 1 hand. So that's why I know that we can't touch. Okay. Says the Gemara, Zeh ma'aseh menorah miksha zahav, the last drasha that we had before. Ba zahav ba miksha, eina ba zahav, eina ba miksha. This is the third halacha I told you, that it only has to be a solid brick of gold if it's made of gold. If it's made of other materials, it could be soldered together. Says the Gemara, miksha de seif l'may asa. What do you do with the extra word miksha? It says miksha 5 times. We've darshaned multiple times, but there's 1 that's extra. So says the Gemara, lumiute chatzaitzers. That's to exclude the chatzaitzers. The chatzaitzers of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Moshe Rabbeinu had trumpets that he would announce, let's say when they would go to war. Those trumpets do not have to be miksha. It's dafka the menorah that has to be made out of a solid piece. The trumpets could have been made conceptually from multiple scraps soldered together. Says the Gemara, the Tanya, as the Brisa says, chatzaitzes hayuboyin mina eshes mina kesef. The chatzaitzes were bought from a single block of metal and from silver, but also mina grutes kasherim. If you made them from scraps and you melted the silver together, it works. Mishar mina matachas psulim. But it cannot be made from other materials. Meaning it has to be made of silver, but it does not have to be a solid piece of silver hammered out, like the menorah. The chatzaitzes could have been multiple pieces scrapped together. The Gemara says a question. So the chatzaitzes of Moshe Rabbeinu had to be silver, but it did not have to be a solid piece. So says the Gemara, why is it that it's possible if it's made of other materials? Because it says kesef. V'havia. It says a lashon havia by kesef, which means it's ma'akiv. The silver is a dafka. So mina grutois nami miksha havia. So why don't you say the same thing by the hammer? It also says miksha, and that should also be ma'akiv. So it says the Gemara. It says v'hayu miksha achas. So the question is like this: are you going with the lashon of the pasuk or not? If you're going super lashon of the pasuk, then take it all. It has to be silver, and it has to be one thing hammered out. You say, nah, it's lav dafka. It doesn't have to be silver. So it doesn't have to be hammered out, but it has to be silver. Why? All or nothing. So it says the Gemara, Mi Rachmana Gabi Menorah Mikshahi, He Chatzaitzis. That's the drasha by the menorah. The dafka menorah is miksha and not the chatzaitzis. Tan Rabbanan, another halacha about the chatzaitzis. Kol hakelim. All the vessels go on the next page. Sha'asa Moshe, ksherim loy, ksherim l'dairis. Chatzaitzis, ksheris loy, psul l'dairis. There was a very unique halacha by the chatzaitzis of Moshe Rabbeinu. They were not allowed to be used by anyone else. Meaning, no future king was able to use the chatzaitzis of Moshe Rabbeinu, as opposed to the other kelim of the Beis HaMikdash that Moshe was involved with. Nobody says that, it's Moshe's menorah, and Moshe's aron. No, obviously, it's used for dairis. Chatzaitzis of Moshe Rabbeinu were put in Geniza. They were not allowed to be used by any future king. So says the Gemara, chatzaitzis is my time. But why is it that no future king is able to use the chatzaitzis of Moshe Rabbeinu? Because it says, aseh lecha, shtei chatzaitzis kesef. It says aseh lecha. Lecha means it's yours to the exclusion of anyone else. Here's the problem. We have that lashon of lecha by other things in the kelim. The Gemara says, lecha v'lo daris el miata, v'asis lecha aroin eitz. It says regarding the aron, asis lecha, that means Moshe's only. What's the answer? The answer is, as we'll see in a moment, the word lecha found throughout the Mishkan is not necessarily a lashon that it has to be Moshe's to the exclusion of anyone else. We have different drashas for it. So says the Gemara, so what's the answer? Ella, ilaman da'amar lecha mishalcha, ilaman da'amar kaviyachol mishalcha ani roitz yosim shalahem. There's a machlekes, and what Masechta is this? This is a sugi in Yuma, that you have certain karbanis that it said lecha regarding Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a machlekes what it means. One opinion means that Moshe Rabbeinu has to pay out of his own funds. Okay. The other opinion is that Hashem is saying, L'cha, kaviyachol, I like your things more than anybody else. Okay. Either way, it doesn't mean l'dairis. So the question is, why is it that by chatzaitzis we're saying the word L'cha means it's yours and no one's ever allowed to use it, when throughout the other parts of the Mishkan, L'cha does not mean that. L'cha just means you have to pay for it yourself. L'cha means that Hashem loves the fact that Moshe is involved in the process, but we don't find that L'cha means yours to the exclusion of anyone else. So why are we here different? So the germs of it. Okay. Shani Hasam Amar Kra L'cha L'cha Trei Zimni. Asay L'cha V'Yelecha. The answer is over here. It's different. It says L'cha twice. Asay L'cha V'Hayu L'cha. The second time is to tell you and you can't. No one else can use it. So generally, L'cha by the Mishkan does not mean that it's Moshe's only and no one else can use it. But it's dafka by chatzaitzis, which says L'cha L'cha twice. It's dafka by that Moshe Rabbeinu only. The real pshat, by the way, is because the chatzaitzis is a lashon of strength. It's like a gaiva. A shayfer is bent, humble. Moshe Rabbeinu, dafka the on of Mikol Adam can use the chatzaitzis and not have it affect him, but other kings need a shayfer. That's what Pashas. Huh? They use chatzaitzis, but not his. So when they use the chatzaitzis, no, they generally use the shayfer for most of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Shem Yishmael is all lichas. They would generally use shayfer. They only use the chatzaitzis to go to war, because when you go to war, that's not a time for humility. That's a time for strength. Anyway, so what we're going to do until the end of the daf is basically which materials can be used for the menorah. We know that gold and other materials as well, but there are some materials that cannot be used. So, which one? No. It's not for now. Obviously. By the way, if it was in here, it would be like, it is for now. Tani Rav Papa, Breder Rav Chan, and Kameder Rav Yosef. Menorah Haisaba, Mina Eshes Min Azav. It was a single block of raw material, and it was made out of gold. So gold, yes. Also, Hakesef Kshera, silver also. Shel Bats out of tin, Vishal Aver, or out of lead, Vishal Gisterin, or out of a cheap metal. Ravi Poisel, Rav Yosef, Rav Yudah Machsher. So in other words, it's a machlokes whether you can use cheap metals, like tin. Shal eitz, but of wood, v'shal etzem, out of bone, v'shal zchuchas, and of gold, divra kolpsul. So the first approach, this is Tani Rav Yosef, the Brisa that Rav Papa, the Brisa that Rav Papa had, which is wood out, glass out. It has to be metal. The shaila is, you know exactly what's going on over there. So those out, the shaila is cheap metal. Cheap metal is a machlokes, but wood and glass is out. So says the Gemara, let's go with the shita of Rav Yossi bar Yehuda. So you could use cheap metal, but glass and wood is out. What's the pshat? So says the Gemara, Amrle, my daitach. What's the explanation? Why is it that everyone agrees that wood and glass is out? The machlokes is cheap metals. So the Amrle, bar bein mar ubein mar klali prati udarshi. Basically, I was going to say something. There's a klal pratu klal. The klal is any material. The prat is gold. Klal pratu klal. The question is, what do you learn from that? So you see that it has to be like the prat. The prat is metal. Gold is metal. So everyone agrees. Klal pratu klal. It has to be a metal. Wood is out, glass is out. The shaila is, what type of metal? So it has to be similar to the klal prat to klal means it has to be similar to the prat. In what way? So one opinion says, well, gold is metal. So any metal could be cheap metal. The other said, no, gold means it has to be a choshev metal. So everyone agrees it has to be a metal because it has to be like gold. The shaila is, does it have to be like gold that has to be a metal, or does it have to be a choshev metal? But everyone agrees wood and glass is out. Kuli al meluchol. Says the Gemara, "Miumar saver ma'aprat mefurish al matechas, af kol shal matechas, umar saver ma'aprat mefurish al davar choshev, af kol davar choshev." Says the Gemara, Amar lei, this was taught to Rav Yosef. Rav Papa said over this brisa to Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, "Sami didach mikami didi." You should erase your brisa because my brisa is not like that. Rav Yosef had a different brisa. Rav Yosef brisa's was that the machlokes is dafka wood. Meaning, you're saying wood is out, glass is out, because it has to be a metal. The machlokes is a cheap metal or a choshev metal. Rav Yosef says, I have a brisa that they were arguing gufa whether you could use wood. He says, the Tanya, kli sheresh she'asen shel eitz, if you made a kli shares out of eitz, Rabbi Paisa, Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda Machsher. So Rav Yosef says, I have a tradition that the dafka arguing whether you can use wood. So you're telling me wood's out, I don't think it's out. So what's the machlokes about? So I was going to say in a moment, the machlokes is whether you go klal prat to klal, or ribo yomiyat. If you go klal prat to klal, it has to be like the prat, which is a metal, to the exclusion of wood or glass. Rav Papa thought everyone agrees to klal prat to klal. The machlokes is how to do it. Rav Yosef says no. The machlokes is gufa. Do you go klal prat to klal or do you go ribo yomiyat? If it's ribo yomiyat, then it's much more inclusive. It's only memayat one thing, but it's inclusive of everything else, as we'll see in a moment. So it's gufa machlokes. You go klal prat to klal or ribo yomiyat. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Paisa v'du Masha, Ma'akim Miflagi, Rabbi Darish Klal Prat, Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda Darish Ribi Omiyat. And we speak it out. Rabbi Darish Klal Prat, Vasisa Menara is Klal. Zav Tar Prat. Miksha Tiasa Menara Chazav Klal. Klal Prat to Klal. Iyat Lechena Prat. It has to be similar to the Prat. Ma Prat Mefurish Shel Matechas, Av Kol Shel Matechas. According to this version, wood is out, but any cheap metal is in. The other opinion does not agree to Klal Prat to Klal. He holds Ribi Omiyat. Reb Yosef, Reb Yehuda Darish Ribi Omiyat. Asisa Menara Riba. Zav Tar Miyat. Miksha Tasa Menara Chazav Riba. There's always a shaila throughout Shas. It's the same fundamental premise of Klal Prat to Klal Riba Miyat. It's the same breakdown. Inclusive statement, exclusive statement, inclusive. But Riba Miyat is much more, you only exclude one thing. So what's Ribo Miyat? Riba Hakol. Umay Rabbi Kol Miyat. It includes all materials, including wood. Umay Miyat Shel Cheres. It excludes earthenware, because earthenware has no comp to gold. At least gold could be melted down. So the Cheres is out. The point is, according to this, wood is in. So Rav Yosef says to Rav Papa, you have a machlok, you have your version, my version is different, and you should erase your brisa. So says the Gemara, an obvious question. Adarabba, why don't you tell Rav Yosef you erase your brisa? So yeah, these two brises don't work. So they did. They potentially did by the Chashmonaim. Maybe. No, you don't. No. Not if you use pine. Not if you use wonderful pine. I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to do it where it's not going to. First of all, also there could be the cups. The cups you put on top. The goof of the menorah could be. No. You use the cups could be made of metal, but the body is made of wood. So the point made of wood, and it went on fire. That was should have seen that coming. Anyway, but kids, so the point is, Rav Yosef and Rav Papa do not have the same prices. Rav Yosef says to Rav Papa, erase your brisa. So why doesn't Rav Papa say to Rav Yosef, erase your brisa? So Loisal Gadek, Rav Yosef says, no, it can't be. The Tanya, Ein Loizav, because I'll tell you why, because I have another brisa that backs me up. What does the brisa say? Ein Loizav, if you don't have gold to make the menorah, maybe Ashel Kesef, Shel Nechoshes, Shel Barzel, Shel Bedil, Shel Eferes. You could bring silver, copper, iron, tin, or lead. Stop. Everyone agrees to that. Comes Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda Masha Avshal Eitz. They say, wood is also okay. So it's mamish like Rav Yosef's version. That everyone agrees that cheap metal is okay. The machlokes is whether you can use wood. V'tanya idoch layasa adam, and just another proof that wood is a potential option, because the Brisa says layasa adam bayis tavnis heichol, aksadra k'neged ulam, chotzer k'neged azara, shulchan k'neged shulchan. So sugin avodah zara, we have this that you're not allowed to replicate the Beis Hamikdash. It's an issa deraisa leisasun iti. So you're not allowed to make. So it says you're not allowed to make an ulam, an azara, shulchan neged shulchan. You're not allowed to make a shulchan. Menorah k'neged menorah. You're not allowed to make a menorah. That's why it's a good thing Chanukah is 8 days, because if it was 7, we would have a big problem. That's the answer to the Beis Yosef Kasha. Why is it 8 days? Because if it was 7, we wouldn't be allowed to have menorahs. You can't have a 7-armed candelabra in your house, because that's making a replica of the menorah. And by the way, you should know, we pass it even if it's small, because in the Beis Hamikdash, while it was very tall, it doesn't have to be very tall. You could be yaitza with a short one as well. And says the Gemara, Shel Shiva Layasa. You're not allowed to make a 7-branched. You can make 5, 6, or 8. And then it continues, you're not allowed to make any material. Why? Because you could technically use any material for the Beis Hamikdash. Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda, you can't even make wood. There's another raya that Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda was making with wood. And sometimes Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda, they say the truth is that by the story of Chanukah, Chashmonaim actually used wood. Okay. Because it was damaged and tameh. The menorah was tameh. Right? I don't think so. It could barely get enough oil to last a day. So.
Is it okay that Shlomo Melech built replicas of everything because it was in the Beis Hamikdash?
Yes. I always found that to be a strange Indian that he was making multiple. I guess the answer is in the process of the Beis Hamikdash, he had some sort of Messiah. No. He had to line them up, but he didn't use them. I think he only used one. He only lit one.
Right, the leftover one of you. Strange. I know you agree.
I don't know. I'm sure he knew what he was doing. So it's like, so the Gemara just has to finish off. Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda says you can't make wood because there was wood used during the Chashmonaim. So Amar Loi, the Rabbanan responded to him, Misham Raya, Shpudin Shel Barzel Hayu, V'chifim Babatz. They said it wasn't actually wood. It was originally iron, and they plastered it with tin. And apparently tin, from a distance, could look, it has a wood-like grain. So it looked wood, so whoever recorded that historically it was wood, it's not true. It was actually tin. But because you see from this, a raya to Rav Yosef, the Rav Yosef's version of the Brisa, that everyone agrees that cheap metal is allowed. The machlokes is to include wood. Okay, just to finish up, Amr Shmuel Mishmei de Saba. So this, it really would help if you have the pictures, just to show the layout of it, but I'm just going to run through it fairly quickly. Goiva Shel Menorah, the height of the menorah was Shmeina Esed Tvachim, was 18 Tvachim. And now it's going to literally go from the floor up, a breakdown of how many Tvachim, what was there. I'll just run through very quickly. Shmeina Esed Tvachim, Haraglayim V'Perach. At the base, and there was a flower just above the base, Shloisha Tvachim, it was 3 tvachim, utvachayim cholak. Then 2 tvachim blank. So now it's 5 tvachim. Tefach shaboy gevia bekafter perach. Then there was a tefach that contained a goblet, a knob, and a flower. Then tvachayim cholak. Then 2 more blank, totaling 8 tvachim. The tefach kafter. Then it had a knob. V'shnei kanim yoytzim imenu. And then 2 branches emerged from that point. Echad ve'elech, one on either side. V'nim shachim v'olim, they extended and went up. Keneged goy b'shel menorah, to the height of the menorah. So now that we're 9 tefachim. Tefach cholak, another blank tefach. Tefach kaftor, another tefach of a knob. Shnei kanim yoytzim imenu, another 2 branches come out of that. Echad ve'elech, nimshachim v'olim, keneged goy b'shel menorah. Tefach cholak, another blank tefach. Tefach kaftor, another tefach of a knob. Shnei kanim yoytzim imenu, another 2 branches. Echad ve'elech, nimshachim v'olim, keneged goy b'shel menorah. Again, if you have the pictures, they do a good job. You see, those 2 branches, another 2 branches, those 2 branches. And then it says, V'tvachayim cholak, another 2 branches blank, 2 tvachim blank. Nishtaru sham shloisha tvachim. There are at least 3 tvachim shebehem shloisha gviyim v'kafta v'perach, which there were 3 goblets, a knob, and a flower, and that was the very top. Gviyim lamahin diamond. What do the gviyim look like? These goblets. It came in kaisis Alexandrium. They look like Alexandrian cups. Kaftorim lamahin diamond. What are the knobs similar to? Came in tapuchi kartayim. They look like Croatian apples, round. And parachim diamond. What are these flowers similar to? Came in parachei amudim. They're like flowers that are sculpted in columns. Okay. V'nimtzu. And if you count them all together, the breakdown was gviyim esem v'shnayim. There were 22 goblets. Kaftarim echarasa, there were 11 knobs. And prachim tisha, there were 9 flowers. Geviyim makvin zezeh, kaftarim makvin zezeh, prachim makvin zezeh. And again, if you're making it out of gold and you miss one decoration, you're not yoytze. Geviyim, kaftarim, prachim makvin zezeh. And if you're missing any, let's say you have all the knobs and all the goblets but no flowers, also no good. Now, just going to finish off with this. Bishloima geviyim esem mishnayim. I understand how there's 22 goblets because the pasuk says umenoira arba geviyim. So basically the breakup is like this. The menorah, they had 4 goblets on top, and then it says 3 goblets on each branch, 6 branches. That's 6, 12, 18. 18 plus 4 is 22. Okay, that's not bad. Arba Didei. The Tamni, sorry, don't do this. I did not look this over. I've been up since 4. Okay, and my car is blocked in. I got a lot going on, and don't. I tried being nice for like 3 days. It got me nowhere. Okay. V'tamni sari tekanim ha'esem v'tartim. So that's how you get to the 22 goblets. Kaftorim, when it comes to the knobs, nami echad aser kaftorim, trei didei v'shisha tekanim. Because there's 1 on each branch, so that's 6. The central one had 2 knobs, v'kaftor, and then an additional 3, so 6 plus 2 plus 3 is 11. Chatzari. Ela prachim tisha minol, and how do you know there are 9 flowers? So the Gemara says, because prachim tredi day v'shisha dekanim. Because if you count, if you look at the breakdown, there are 2 flowers in the center one, and a flower on each knob, on each branch. That's 2 plus 6 is 8. So where's the 9th one? So if you look at the base, so says the Gemara, the shisha tamni amrav shalman ksiv ad yerecha ad mircha pikshahi. It says from the top to the bottom, and it mentions a flower at the bottom. So there was 1 flower at the base. I will stop it.